I'm sure many of you are familiar with the infamous project MKUltra. It was a secret program that the CIA ran from the 1950s to the 1970s, and its focus was on creating mind-controlling drugs that could be used to brainwash enemies of the USA to reveal information when put under interrogation. Yes, this was an actual government-funded project. The 1950s was a strange time. A lot has come out about the project in recent years, with classified and declassified documents being leaked online, and the US government being a lot more open about some of the less humane aspects of the experiments. But some have speculated that Project MKUltra wasn't the only program that involved brainwashing that was active during the 50s and 60s. Let's talk about the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act, which was apparently up to much worse. But before we talk about the many conspiracy theories around this, conspiracy, we need to go over some history and geography. I know, it's not the most captivating thing in the world, but it's only brief and it's pretty easy to follow, so stick with me for a minute. The year is 1956. Alaska is not yet a US state, but rather a territory of the US. They're essentially the same thing, except Alaska had more independence in terms of government when it was a territory as opposed to a state. The Cold War was in full swing, and Alaska is very much at risk of invasion by the USSR from the US's point of view, due to how close it is to Siberia, Russia. Well, that was a very quick introduction to the situation. Now onto the subject of this video, the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act. You see, up until 1956, Alaska didn't have any centers or institutions for mental health patients. This wasn't too much of a problem, as Alaska had a very small population at the time, around 230,000 people. These sorts of facilities require lots of funding and highly trained workers. Two things Alaska didn't have a lot of at the time, but these were two things that the US did have, especially the financial aspect. On 26th of July 1956, the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act was passed, and with it came a $12.5 million grant, $120 million in 2020 money, as well as 4,000 square kilometers of federally owned land in Alaska to build the brand new Alaska Mental Health Trust. However, controversy and suspicion arose almost immediately after the bill was passed. I mean, think about it.
Wait a minute!
Why would a small mental health trust need so much money and land? Money and land that was being gifted to them, not loaned by the US government. Well, one logical argument would be that the US were planning on making Alaska a US state in only a few years' time. And so they wanted this healthcare system set up so that when US immigrants moved to Alaska, the correct facilities were already in place. But opposers to the Democratic congressman who passed the bill thought different. The biggest conspiracy surrounding the bill was put forward by the APRF, or the American Public Relations Forum. This group was mainly comprised of conservative Catholic women who were strongly anti-communist, but were also on the opposite side of the political spectrum to the majority party in Congress at the time, the Democrats. The APRF had a strong distrust in their government, something that was common among many US citizens at the time, due to the government hiding information about the ongoing Cold War against the USSR and the Vietnam War. This group, and other members of the public with extremist views, thought that their own government was going to betray them, eventually morphing into something similar to the USSR, and consequently succumbing to communism. And they thought that the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act was a clear example of this. Here's what the APRF had to say about the bill. Rather than paraphrase, it's better if it's read out in full. Is it the purpose of the bill to establish a concentration camp for political prisoners under the guise of treatment of mental cases? The answer, based on a study of the bill, indicates that it is entirely within the realm of possibility that we may be establishing in Alaska our own version of the Siberian slave camps run by the Russian government. This legislation, says its opponents, will place every resident of the United States at the mercy of the whims and fancies of any person with whom they might have a disagreement, causing a charge of mental illness to be placed against them, with immediate deportation to Siberia, USA. What they're saying in basic terms is that the US is going to use these mental health centers as concentration camps to brainwash political enemies or even its own citizens, similar to the Russian gulags. But instead of hard labor, victims would be subjected to brainwashing. Of course, the theory was denied by the government, but considering that programs such as MKUltra were also going on at the time, this massive conspiracy isn't too much of a stretch. And it wasn't just the APRF who thought that the government was up to no good. Medical workers across the country were skeptical that so much funding and land was needed for a program that wasn't entirely necessary in the first place. One man, by the name of Dr. George A. Snyder, even sent letters to all members of Congress saying the bill and the new centers should be looked into, regarding elements of treason against the American people behind the front of this mental health program. Even L. Ron Hubbard, the leader of the Church of Scientology, was against it, with Scientology often using its ammunition against the practices of psychiatry. And if the Church of Scientology thinks it's odd, then something is definitely up. Well, that was a quick history lesson surrounding the mysterious Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act and the many theories regarding it.